aspects that weren't taken in. How will he ensure that this gets reflected in other iterations of budget implementation bills?
In all budget presentations and budget implementation bills, there is extensive consultations that's done. This particular Minister of Finance and the department have done exceptional work in terms of reaching out to Canadians and stakeholders to get their input. This is a budget that reflects the desires and the wills of the Canadian people from coast to coast to coast.
The honourable member will have 2 minutes left of questions next time the bill comes for debate. Statements by members. Déclaration de député. L'honorable député de Winnipeg North.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, in 1971, Canada adopted the multiculturalism policy, which acknowledged that the Canadians come from a wide variety of cultural backgrounds, Madam Speaker. And this is something in which we should all be very proud of. The month of June is very special. June 27 is a day in which we celebrate multiculturalism. If you think of the month of June, you'll recall members in the House standing up, talking about Indigenous Heritage Month, Filipino Heritage Month, Portuguese Heritage Month, Italian Heritage Month. It is a month in which we celebrate and appreciate our diversity, Madam Speaker. And if you happen to be in Winnipeg in the month of August and you want to travel the world, you can do so in Winnipeg by attending Folklorama, where you'll be able to experience the 50-plus pavilions. I would encourage individuals to get out and appreciate Canada's diversity.
The honourable member for Regina Wascana.
Madam Speaker, I would like to say Maligayang Pombansang Buwan ng Samana Filipino. Happy Filipino Heritage Month. June is Filipino Heritage Month, a time when Canadians celebrate with their Filipino friends and neighbors. Over the years, Filipino Canadians have contributed to our economy and cultural diversity in many ways, not least of which by establishing dozens of Jollibee restaurants across the country, including the one on Quant Street in Regina, just down the street from my constituency office. This month, Filipino Canadians will be celebrating by raising their flag and singing their national anthem, known as Lupang Hinirangan, which means chosen land. To the nearly 1 million Canadians of Filipino heritage, we are glad you have chosen this land to call home. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Whitby.
Madam Speaker, each spring I have the honour of notifying many businesses and organizations in my riding of Whitby receiving funds through the Canada Summer Jobs Program. The creation of quality summer work experiences for young people enriches their development while contributing to a stronger local economy and a more inclusive community. Today, I'd like to acknowledge an incredibly inspiring community organization in Whitby that I had the opportunity of visiting recently, named Nova's Ark. The people there are dedicated to helping people with special needs of all ages by caring for animals, and they have many, from Siberian lynxes to camels. They create unique educational experiences to help their students develop the academic, behavioral, cognitive, and social skills needed for success. I was deeply touched by the work they do and was thrilled to see the Canada Summer Jobs Program not only benefiting students and organizations, but also improving the quality of life of individuals. This is a great example of how social enterprises make a real and positive impact on the lives of Canadians. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Courtney Alberni.
Madam Speaker, it is now almost 2 years since a wonderful young Tloquet First Nation woman was shot and killed by a police officer in Edmundston, New Brunswick during a wellness check. Her family, friends, community members, and Canadians seeking justice for Chantal Moore are currently walking to Victoria and will arrive tomorrow. I am unable to be with them. Instead, I rise today to remind this House that Canada is still in desperate need of comprehensive police reform. The government must act to address the disproportionate violence against Indigenous people at the hands of police, and Indigenous representation must be included in all investigations of police violence. Reforms are urgently required related to recruitment and training of police forces at all levels. Further delays only put more Indigenous people at risk from a similar fate suffered by Chantal. Today, I'm sending strength to her family, friends, community as they make this difficult journey.
L'honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Longueuil-Charles-le-Moine. Madam Speaker, this evening the Saint-Hubert Volunteer Centre will be celebrating its 50th anniversary at a large banquet which I will be pleased to attend. This organisation in my riding, the primary mission of which is to promote volunteerism and meet the needs of the community, is an important social player in our community. Thanks to its volunteers, it offers essential services to the population and provides valuable assistance to the most vulnerable people in society. Whether it's through its Meals on Wheels service, medical transportation, compassionate phone calls, or any other service, the Saint-Hubert Volunteer Centre is a model of mutual aid that makes a real difference in the lives of the people in our community. What's more, it has never stopped its activities, even at the height of the health crisis. I would therefore like to offer my most sincere congratulations to the Saint-Hubert Volunteer Centre for its 50 years of commitment to our population. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Bruce Grey Owen Sound.
Madam Speaker, today I rise to recognize World Cider Day, a day to celebrate the over 370 cideries across Canada, including 4 in my riding of Bruce Grey Owen Sound: Windswept Cidery, Duxbury Cidery Company, Beaver Valley Orchard Cidery, and Coffin Ridge. Canadian cider is amongst the best in the world, with origins tracing back to the Hudson's Bay Company. In fact, historically, cider was at one time on par with beer consumption here in Canada. In recent years, cider has grown in popularity both here and abroad, with Canadian cideries producing over 39 million litres of great Canadian cider annually. From the rich history, the excellent producers, and of course the delicious end product, and considering our ideal climate for growing apples, government should be supporting growing our cider exports and seeing the industry flourish. However, the Liberal government's recently announced excise duty for wine and cider risks rotting this industry to the core. Today, I urge the Minister of Finance to do the right thing and scrap the excise duty on cider, or at least support an exemption. 4,000 Canadian jobs depend on it.
The Honourable Member for Etobicoke Centre.
Madam Speaker, 100 days ago, Russia began its unjustified genocidal war on Ukraine. Ukrainians are fighting for their freedom, but they're also fighting to defend our security, and we have to fight for them. Some countries like Canada are fighting for them, but some Western European countries have dragged their feet on providing weapons to Ukraine and have actually suggested that Ukraine appease Russia or avoid humiliating Putin or concede territory to Russia. These suggestions are preposterous. Firstly, they're preposterous because appeasing Russia has never worked. It didn't work in 2008, didn't work in 2014 after they invaded Crimea and Donbass. It has never worked. And secondly, giving up territory to Russia would be a victory for Russia. It would condone genocide, condone violations of the international rules-based order, and would encourage Russia and others to do the same thing again. The only acceptable outcome is a definitive victory for Ukraine that includes the Donbass and Crimea. Ukrainians are fighting for us. We must fight for them, not for another day, not for 100 days, but for as long as it takes, until they win, until we all win. Slava Ukraini.
L'Honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Orléans. Madam Speaker, as a resident and Member of Parliament for Orleans, I would like to share the incredible stories and achievements of 2 of my constituents.
First, I want to celebrate the accomplishment of Stephen Poloz, the former Governor of the Bank of Canada and a finalist of the Shaughnessy Cohen Prize for Political Writing. Mr. Poloz's book, The Next Age of Uncertainty, How the World Can Adapt to a Riskier Future, maps out the powerful force that are shaping our future and offers an indispensable guide to navigate through a risky world. J'encourage tous les résidents.
I encourage everyone to read a copy of Mr. Peloz's book and his skillful analysis of past crises, from the Victorian Depression to the most recent recession of 2008.
I also want to highlight, Madam Speaker, an emotional story of the Prokonovich family. Because of the Canada-Ukrainian authorization for emergency travel, Mr. Prokonovich was able to bring his sister, who's undergoing chemotherapy treatment, and her son to Orléans.
I had the honour of meeting the Prokorovich family on Wednesday, and I would like to thank them for their warm Ukrainian hospitality and an incredible lunch. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Northumberland, Peterborough.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. 83 seats, 41%. 52 seats more than any other party in the Ontario legislature, a 16% margin of victory. Madam Speaker, it doesn't get much more decisive than that. the Ontario PCs ran a disciplined and smart campaign that focused on the issues that Ontarians are concerned about. They had a plan to address the affordability crisis, to rebuild the Ontario economy. Congratulations to my MPP, David Piccini, who was well rewarded for his tireless advocacy for the people of Northumberland, Peterborough South. And congratulations to Doug Ford and the Ontario PC Party for getting it done.
The honourable member for Cambridge.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In 2015, the House first recognized June as ALS Awareness Month, a time to support Canadians who battle against this fatal neurological disease and honor their resilience and their strength. ALS affects about 3,000 Canadians and has no known causes, Madam Speaker. It strikes fast and has life-altering impact on those affected and their families. Throughout June, the ALS Society of Canada is running educational and fundraising activities to help those living with ALS and support research as they work to find a cure. Madam Speaker, I would like to wish two incredibly strong constituents of my riding of Cambridge, Graham Braun and Dennis McIntyre, best wishes as they, along with their families, battle ALS, and I extend my support to all of those suffering from this horrible disease. Madam Speaker, we will find a cure. Thank you.
L'honorable député de Montmagny.
The honourable member for Montmagny-Lillet, Kamouraska, Rivière-du-Loup. Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's currently Tourism Week in Canada. I'm privileged to be the proud representative of a very lucky riding with many rivers and lakes with a variety of very lovely people. There's so much to do in my riding that you could spend all summer there. You could go to Rivière-du-Loup to watch whales. You could watch also some birds. You could sample cheeses. Alongside the friendly locals, you could cycle. You could canoe, kayak. You could mountain climb. You could visit Gros-Île, a Parks Canada site. You could meet the Maliseet Nation. You could also eat the delicious food from Kamouraska. Come see us, Madam Speaker, and thank you to all the entrepreneurs from the tourism world. We missed you, we love you. Come visit us, enjoy, and share the good news, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today I want to raise awareness of the human cost of this Liberal-made immigration backlog. I get hundreds of correspondence from Canadians and newcomers alike, desperate for help. Over 2.1 million people are stranded in this massive backlog, and they can't get a hold of anyone in the department. They're left waiting months or even years longer than IRCC's posted processing times. I know that my colleagues' offices are all dealing with the same issue. Newcomers' mental health is suffering, families are being separated, and Canadian businesses and our economy are paying the price as labour shortages grow and newcomers choose to leave. After forcing them to wait in this backlog and face the affordability crisis, who can blame newcomers for wanting to get away from this government? Canada was a beacon of hope and new opportunities. Now, Canada is known for backlogs and wait times. I hope that our colleagues on the Liberal backbenches do the right thing and join us in demanding the Immigration Minister clear these Liberal-made backlogs. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Milton.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. In Canada, diversity is our strength. Diversité est notre force. And that is never more true than throughout the month of June. June is Pride Month, a time to celebrate love and authenticity, to promote diversity, and to continue the fight for full inclusion that gay, two-spirit, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, intersex, queer and questioning, pan and asexual people have been fighting for since before the Toronto Bathhouse riots in 1982 and Canada's first gay liberation protest, which took place here in Ottawa in August 1971. Juin est également le mois national.
This is also the Indigenous History Month, which allows us to think about the history, culture and contributions of First Nations, Inuits and Métis.
Opportunity to learn about and recognize the role that Indigenous peoples continue to play and shape in Canada. It's always important to me personally to say Nakamik to Inuit for the invention of the kayak, a boat which I've loved and enjoyed for decades. Juin est aussi
June is also the opportunity to celebrate our rich multiculturalism.
Months. Auguri, Parabéns e mabuhay to my Italian, Portuguese, and Filipino friends and neighbors. In Canada, Madam Speaker, diversity is a fact, but inclusion is an act. And this month, it's an act of love, kindness, and generosity.
The honourable member for Timmins, James Bay.
I pay tribute today to a colleague, a leader, a personal friend, Mr. Gilles Bisson, and thank him for 32 years of incredible service to democracy, the people of Ontario, the city of Timmins. Oh, there are a million stories one could tell about how many people Gilles has helped over the years, of the countless fights he's taken on and won, of his fierce love for Northern Ontario. But let's go back to when he was a young miner in the gold mines. And he was meeting immigrant mining widows whose husbands had died of emphysema and lung cancer. And they faced a solid wall of denial from the companies, the government, the medical institutions. And Gilles took on their fight and helped change the compensation laws of Ontario forever. That's the passion that he has carried through his whole career. I congratulate George Peary, our new MPP, and I will work with him on many of the issues that face our region. But there will never be a political legacy in the North that is as enduring or inspiring as that of Gilles Bisson. Take some time, my friend. I look forward to drinking your homemade wine at the lake this summer.
The honourable député de Berthier.
The honourable member for Berthier-Masquinongé. Madam Speaker, the petition on the protection of the riverbanks that I sponsored, as well as a series of resolutions in support of this initiative voted by various municipal councils in my riding, will be tabled today. The signatories are asking the federal government to implement a program to protect the banks of the St. Lawrence River by taking adequate measures to counter erosion and ensure a safe environment, such as regulations imposing a speed limit according to type of vessel and the installation and maintenance of bank protection structures. The federal government has abandoned shoreline municipalities and their residents since 1997, thereby abdicating its responsibility to maintain the shoreline protection structures it has erected. This is scandalous. Instead of sticking its paws into Quebec's jurisdictions and withholding monies with conditions, the federal government should mind its own business. The erosion of the banks of the St. Lawrence is its responsibility. We must act. They must act and support our municipalities and their citizens.
Bravo! Bravo! Member for Barrie Innisfil.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On behalf of the Conservative Party of Canada, I rise to congratulate Premier Doug Ford and his team of candidates on winning a strong, stable, progressive Conservative majority government. I also want to thank Andrea Horwath and Stephen Del Duca. Leading a party through an election is a tough task, and I wish them both the best of luck in their future endeavors. After a hard-fought election, the people of Ontario endorsed Premier Ford's plan to rebuild the provincial economy, to control spending, to keep the province open, and to build infrastructure like the Bradford Bypass. With the result last night, it's clear that working people have found a home in the Conservative movement. And while other parties engage in perpetual virtue signaling, Conservatives stand with workers, fighting for their jobs and the well-being of families. I also want to congratulate Andrea Kangin, Carolyn Mulrooney, Jill Dunlop, Brian Saunderson, and MPP Doug Downey for winning their seats. They will continue to serve the people of Central Ontario with excellence. Madam Speaker, as a resident of Ontario, I look forward to watching the re-elected Ford government get it done.
Bravo. The honourable member for Don Valley East.
Speaker, 2 years ago, the world witnessed a horrific crime. Committed in broad daylight in front of dozens of witnesses, police officers murdered George Floyd. Madam Speaker, in the United States, more than one black man dies each day by police officers. And because of this, I'm sad to say that I was not shocked when I first heard of Mr. Floyd's death. But this case was different. It was captured clearly on video and shared with the world. Our planet got a glimpse of life in Black America. Mr. Floyd's death was felt around the world and sparked both an international movement and uprising. 2 years later, his death continues to remind us that there's much work to do in Canada and around the world to combat anti-Black racism and police brutality. Speaker, as members of this House and as Canadians, we must never forget the significance of what took place 2 years ago, and we must remain diligent in our fight against hate in this country and throughout the world. Thank you.
Questions orales. Oral questions, honorable.
The honourable member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Madam Speaker, I believe that a number of my Liberal, NDP, and Bloc colleagues are unaware of important facts about Bill C-5 that they're preparing to support. 11 serious criminal offences involving firearms will no longer be subject to mandatory minimums. Robbery with a firearm, discharge of a firearm with intent, using a firearm in the commission of an offense, for example. Why does the Prime Minister, supported by the other two opposition parties, think it's more important to protect armed criminals rather than their victims?
Parliamentary Secretary? Minister?
Madame,
the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madame President.
Madam Speaker, those who commit serious offenses will continue to receive a significant sentence.
Will continue to receive serious sentences. Our bill is about getting rid of the failed policies that filled our prisons with low-risk, first-time offenders who needed help not to be put in jail. These failed policies did not deter crime, did not keep us safe. They targeted the vulnerable and racialized Canadians, Madam Speaker.
A member for Mégontier-Clérable. That's the problem, Madam Speaker. While under the guise of trying to do the right thing, three parties in the House will make the egregious mistake of passing Bill C-5. Instead of sending a strong message to armed criminals, they are announcing that Canada will now be more tolerant and they'll get a second chance. Victims of gun crime, Madam Speaker, don't get a second chance. The reality is that wealthy crime groups will now be able to afford the very best lawyers, and the worst criminals will get the softest sentences. Why help criminals and abandon their victims? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice.
Madam Speaker, our government is committed to our criminal justice system reform. It's a promise we made to Canadians and we intend to keep it. This is about criminal justice policy that actually keeps our communities safe. A justice system that targets unfairly Indigenous peoples, Black and marginalized communities is not effective, does not keep us safe, and must be changed, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Barrie-Innisfil.
2 days ago, a 42-year-old man was gunned down in the middle of a crowded restaurant in Laval, Quebec. It happened in broad daylight in front of children. According to reports, police have linked this shooting to organized crime. Bill C-5 will mean that criminal and gang member who did this could face a reduced sentence and be back in their community sooner than they would be without the Liberals' new soft-on-crime bill. The reality is that street gangs and criminals will become more emboldened if there is little price to pay for shooting up our streets. How can the Liberals justify this?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, I agree with my honourable colleague that it's unacceptable that we continue to see innocent lives taken away as a result of gun violence, which is why I hope my colleague and the Conservatives support Bill C-21. Why? Because it takes on organised crime head on. It raises maximum penalties against those illegal smugglers and gun traffickers, Madam Speaker. It also gives police more...
Member for Barrie-Innisfil.
Due to this Prime Minister's failed economic policies, Canadians are worse off now than they were when the Liberals formed government. Former Finance Minister Bill Morneau acknowledged it in a speech when he said, and I quote, "I'm much more worried about our economic prospects today in 2022 than I was 7 years ago." And I'm sure the Liberals will accuse Morneau of spreading disinformation. Young Canadians can't afford a home. Seniors can't afford groceries. Canadians can't afford to fill up their cars. The Liberals have completely mismanaged the Canadian economy. Why don't they just admit it like Bill Morneau did?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Economic growth and prosperity is not only our priority, it's our reality. Experts are forecasting that Canada will have the highest growth among G7 countries both this year and next year. In the last quarter, Madam Speaker, we see consistent growth. S&P and Moody's has reaffirmed our AAA credit scoring, and 2021 will show the highest trade surplus for Canada in over 13 years, Madam Speaker. I could go on and on. More questions, please.
The Honourable Member for Barrie-Innisfil.
Well, the lines of credits of Canadians go up. Many people who work in the trades drive from job to job. They don't have a choice, Madam Speaker. Plumbers, electricians, and other hard workers don't have the option of staying home and working virtually. They have to travel. Unfortunately, this government's policies have driven up the price of fuel to record levels. This is making life very difficult and expensive for tradespeople and businesses. Does the government realize how their harmful gas price policy is hard on the hardest working Canadians and how they're destroying the bottom line of many who work and have businesses in skilled trades?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, we absolutely support the hardworking tradespeople in Canada. And Madam Speaker, there are a number of measures in the budget which are going to help all Canadians face the increased cost of living and the increased gas prices. But unfortunately, last night at the absolute 11th hour, the Conservatives filed 62 motions in order to block the budget implementation bill, in order to block $2 billion being sent to the provinces in order to help with emergency surgeries, in order to block funding for vulnerable Canadians, in order to block our support for subsidized dental care, Madam Speaker. This is unfortunate that these political games are being played.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Madam Speaker, 3 years after the commitment to include Davie shipyard and shipbuilding contracts, nothing has changed. Davie's getting crumbs, while Irving and Halifax is crumbling under the contracts. Yesterday, there was proof this was a political choice. The Minister of Supply blamed the delays on Davie, saying it refused to pay to modernize its yard. Yesterday, she confirmed she's in negotiations to subsidize the modernization, but not Davie's, Irving's. So Irving gets a contract, Irving gets the subsidies, and Davie gets nothing. Why are the Liberals deliberately leaving Quebec out? Thank my colleague for that question.
Fully committed to delivering on to the Canadian Coast Guard's fleet renewal plan, including selecting a third shipyard as a strategic partner in the national shipbuilding strategy. As the process of Davie's official qualification to become Canada's third shipyard is still ongoing, we are continuing to work with them every step of the way. Davie is a strong, reliable partner and is doing significant work to help the government deliver for Canadians. In fact, Chantier Davie has been awarded $2.1 billion in the National Shipbuilding Strategy contracts, including the conversion of 3 medium icebreakers. We look forward to continuing to work with Chantier Davie.
The Honourable Member for Beauport-Limoilou. Madam Speaker, by confirming that she wants to subsidize the modernization of the Irving shipyard while requiring Davie to pay for the same work, the minister is proving two things. First, that Irving is still not up to date and should not get contracts, but Ottawa is giving them to them anyway. And she's also proving that depriving Davie of these contracts under the pretext that they're need to be modernized is just an excuse to not give it to them. The Liberals are depriving Quebec of a contract in excess of $10 billion for false reasons. When will they stop strangling the shipbuilding industry in Quebec? The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, quite the contrary. We are fully supportive of our national shipbuilding strategy. I've seen firsthand this shipbuilding strategy at work, visiting shipyards and seeing men and women working very hard. We know the contributions that the National Shipbuilding Strategy is making to the economy and the jobs it is creating. In fact, 17,000 jobs maintaining or creating. And the commitment is we are going to continue to work with Chantier Davie. They are a strong shipyard. We are happy that we've been working with them every step of the way and look forward to moving forward in the addition of them as a third shipyard. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for North Island Powell River.
Madam Speaker, 7 years and still Veteran Affairs has not met their service standard for processing disability claims. This week, the AG report told us what veterans have been saying all along. They are waiting far too long, and it is causing suffering to the veteran and to the people who love them. Weak data collection means that Veteran Affairs cannot provide reliable, truthful information about their numbers, while internal human resource issues are leaving veterans behind. Madam Speaker, how many reports are required before this government looks after veterans?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for her question, important question. We want to start off by thanking, of course, the Office of the Auditor General for her report, and we want to let the House know and all Canadians that we've accepted all 4 recommendations, and we have invested $340 million to hire new staff and speed up the processes, and we have seen a decrease of over 50% in the last year and a half, and we will continue to do what we need to do to ensure that veterans and their families receive the supports and benefits they need. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Edmonton Grisba.
3 years ago, the National Inquiry into Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girls released its report. For 3 long years, this crisis has continued while this Liberal government fails to implement the calls to justice and save Indigenous lives. In Winnipeg alone, 5 Indigenous women have been murdered in just the last few weeks. My colleague from Winnipeg Centre has been urging this government to deliver funding for more low-barrier, safe shelters. How many more years will families have to wait for this government to finally implement the calls to justice?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for his question. Madam Speaker, in Canada, Indigenous women are 12 times more likely to go missing or be murdered. This is shameful. This is why our government put $2.2 billion forward over the next 5 years for missing and murdered Indigenous women. But we know we have to move faster. We know we have to do better. We know we can do better. And Madam Speaker, we will do better.
The honourable member for Central Okanagan, Similton and Nicola.
Madam Speaker, the last time Prince Edward Island had inflation as high as 9%, it was in the 1980s when there was also a big borrowing, tax and spend, inflationary Liberal Prime Minister in office. The regional breakdown is even worse in Charlottetown, Summerside, clocking in at a breakneck speed of 9.5%. 9.5%, Madam Speaker. The rising cost of fuel is only outpaced by this always be spending Prime Minister. Will he stop taking Islanders and their MPs for granted and give them and all Canadians a break on GST at the pumps?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Speaker, allow me to congratulate the new finance critic for the Conservative Party. It's just unfortunate that he campaigned on a $168 billion deficit, 50% more than our last budget. It's also unfortunate that the previous finance critic for the Conservative Party was summarily fired for having criticized the fact that the member for Carleton was impugning the independence of the Bank of Canada. And of course, the previous finance critic was the member for Carleton himself, who is now doing a leadership campaign based on advising Canadians to use crypto.
For Hastings, Lennox and Addington.
Canadians are at their breaking point due to financial stress. This entire nation is in trouble. It is no longer paycheck to make ends meet. Many are in a mode of survival. On top of maxing out credit cards, people are transferring balances from one credit card to another just to avoid insolvency. Yes. Out of control spending, record high cost of living, and empty platitudes from this indifferent government is getting old. Madam Speaker, does this government actually have a plan to stop this cycle of destruction?
Good question. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, I would invite the member opposite to read the budget and our plan, but you mentioned paychecks, and I couldn't agree more. Jobs, jobs, jobs. We have created over 3.5 million jobs over the last 2 years. Unemployment is at its lowest level in over 50 years, Madam Speaker. Well-paying jobs is putting good paychecks in the pockets of Canadians, and that's our focus.
The honourable member for Caribou Prince George.
Madam Speaker, the cost of food has risen 15%. Gas is over $2 a litre. And what this government has done to our seniors is shameful. Public transit is non-existent, and for many, the hospital is over a 2-hour drive. My constituent Dave Kendall wrote and said, "I'm slowly going broke, and my savings are disappearing." He had one question for this government, so I'll ask it for him. How do they expect seniors to live?
Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, we are doing everything possible in order to support Canadians through this difficult time. We understand that the cost of living is rising. It is due in large part to the war begun by Russia. But Madam Speaker, I would urge the Conservatives to please reconsider. Last night they filed 62 different motions that are essentially going to delay or gut the budget implementation bill, a budget that includes support for seniors, that includes support for vulnerable Canadians. Please, Madam Speaker, I urge the Conservatives to help support Canadians.
The honourable member for Cumberland Colchester.
Madam Speaker, the cost of living in Canada is crippling small businesses. In the words of my constituent David, who owns a small business, it is also pushing middle-class workers close to the poverty line. David has 30 individuals and 16 vehicles on the road on any given day. His fuel costs have doubled in the last month, and this means that projects he bid on a month ago, he's going to have to pay to complete. His question echoes what many other Canadians want to know, and it's very simple, Madam Speaker. What is the government going to do about rising fuel costs and the out-of-control cost of living?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Madam Speaker, the member opposite raises the importance of our small businesses. Small business are indeed the backbone of the Canadian economy. And in our budget, what we have done is expand the possibility for even more small businesses to be able to use the small business tax rate, essentially lowering the tax rate for our small business owners, Madam Speaker. But all of that is now up in jeopardy now that the Conservatives have filed 62 different motions in order to gut the budget implementation bill. Madam Speaker, for the sake of our entrepreneurs and small businesses, can the Conservatives finally support the budget?
The honourable member for Cypress Hills Grasslands.
With the way it's going, not a chance. Madam Speaker, it's a devastating time for farmers, ranchers, and Canadians. This week, a rural municipality in my riding told me about a perfect storm that's brewing at home. Their ratepayers are already maxed out with paying for groceries and fuel, driven by this government's reckless monetary policy. Now, another severe drought looming means that crops will fail and ranchers are going to have to sell off their herds. That's on top of the higher input costs already faced by our producers. Do the Liberals know, Madam Speaker, what happens when taxpayers and people who produce our food go out of business?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture. Thank you, Madam Speaker. As you know, we are extremely concerned by the situation, the increase of entrant prices, and that's why we're working very closely with different sectors of the industry to help our producers. We've amended the early payment program to ensure they can have access to advances, a portion without interest, a portion of the loan without interest. And also, we are continuing to work with them in different ways. I'd like to note that last year we had a budget of more than $4 billion for the agricultural sector. That shows how invested we are. The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lac-Binière. Madam Speaker, in the thinly veiled words of former Finance Minister Bill Morneau, we learned that the Liberal government spending spree has contributed to inflation in Canada, cutting off the incomes of thousands of Canadians because absolutely every single thing costs more. Madam Speaker, more proof of Liberal incompetence as this government has totally lost control of spending. Do the Liberals agree with Bill Morneau's statements? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Madam Speaker, the member asking the question has campaigned on the proposal to spend a lot more than the Liberal government. Madam Speaker, it was a deficit that $168 million that they'd proposed. We are focusing on prosperity and economic growth, and that is why experts expect that this year and next year, Canada will have the highest growth rate among the G7 countries. The Honourable Member for Joliette. Madam Speaker, the luxury tax in C-19 misses the mark. It spares the rich who buy private jets, but it taxes Quebec's aerospace industry. My Liberal colleague knows this. She promised 2 weeks ago, when I quote, to make sure that our manufacturers don't pay the price. Since then, her government has voted against all our amendments that would solve the problem. Taxing the rich is fine, but taxing instead the jewel in the crown of Quebec's economy is a no-no. When will the Quebec Liberals get to work to protect the aerospace industry? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Madam Speaker, I fully agree that the aerospace industry is absolutely crucial to our economy. It's a jewel in the crown of our economy, particularly in Quebec. And as I said last week, we are going to ensure that our manufacturers do not pay the price of this luxury tax. But a luxury tax, Madam Speaker, is so important. We know that everybody has to pay their fair share, particularly now with the cost of living that is rising. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Honourable Member for Joliette. Madam Speaker, Bill C-19 is on the verge of being passed, and it would be harmful to the aerospace industry. That's why the Bloc Québécois reached out to the government. We are proposing to pass C-19, but to delay the implementation of the luxury tax on aircraft. The government doesn't understand the impact its ill-conceived measure will have on our businesses. At the very least, it should take the time to study them. Will the government accept this reasonable compromise on behalf of our workers, our businesses rather, and their workers? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Madam Speaker, it's always a pleasure to be able to collaborate with the Bloc Québécois on important files such as this one. Madam Speaker, we are sealing 62 different amendments by the Conservatives that is blocking the progress of this bill. I hope that the Bloc Québécois will help us in order to ensure that we can pass our budget bill and help Canadians with our budget. Thank you.
Member for Calgary Forest Law.
Gillette Burka is an elite Ethiopian runner who broke the Canadians' all-comers record at the 2018 Ottawa Marathon. This year, her and 24 other elite athletes from Ethiopia and Kenya were looking forward to return to Ottawa and compete in the Tartan Ottawa International Marathon. They missed the marathon because their visas were caught in the Liberal-made immigration backlog. Can the minister clarify if this was due to the Liberals' mismanagement of immigration system in Canada or the unaddressed systemic racism in IRCC?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you very much to the member for his questions. Let me remind this House that last year we welcomed in our country over 405 new permanent residents, the greatest number of newcomers in a year in Canadian history. In 2022, we've already hit another record, Madam Speaker, processing over 246 PR applications and processing 216,000 work permits application. We're going to continue to invest in our immigration system, and I urge actually the member opposite to agree to pass our budget because there's
the honourable member for Calgary Forest Law.
Madam Speaker, the Caregivers Program at IRCC continues to be one of the worst-run programs. Canadians are desperate to get caregivers here to help their families, but almost no applications have been finalized. The government said the goal was to finalize 80% of these cases within 12 months. The reality is, since April 2020, an average of only 2.2% of cases submitted per month are actually finalized. When will the government finally admit they failed caregivers and fix the caregivers' backlog?
Here, here.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, if last year has taught us anything, it is the importance of those who provide care to the members of our community, to allow them to stay in their homes and to receive the care they need in their communities. Last year, we welcomed more than 4,000 new permanent residents through our caregiver streams, and this year we're expecting to see another 6,000 new permanent residents through the caregiver stream. We will continue to work to bring caregivers to Canada to make sure they can provide supports for families who live in our communities.
Honourable member for Chatham, Kent Leamington.
A year ago, a constituent, Brian, married Daniela, a Colombian national, and they applied for a visa for her 7-year-old daughter, Sophie. 9 months later, no communication, no updates, just, we are processing your application. In frustration, they reached out to my office. We were told that on September the 9th, IRCC's system change delayed applications made before that date. Astoundingly, the advice given by the agent was to start over with a whole new application along with additional fees, which would be probably processed before the original application. Minister, is this level of service acceptable?
It wasn't working. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madame la Présidente, we understand that decisions on immigration cases can have a profound impact on individuals' lives. Every case is assessed based on its merits in a fair manner and in accordance to Canadian law. Each case is unique, but all applicants can expect impartial, professional treatment and clear, accountable decision-making. Due to the privacy law, I cannot comment on specific case, but it will be a pleasure in reaching out and talking more to the member. Merci.
Honourable.
The Honourable Member for Montmagny, Lille, Kamouraska, Rivière-du-Loup. Madam Speaker, farmers in my region and throughout Quebec are drowning. Not only are they seeing the price of diesel rise astronomically, but they're dealing with a spectacular rise in the cost of fertilizer. And if that weren't enough, they are facing the endless delays from Immigration Canada, and temporary foreign workers can't even come to Canada. Some farmers fear they're going to lose their crops, and that's what they live off of, and that's what feeds us. Why is this government refusing to fix the shameful delays and endless delays at Immigration Canada? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Madam Speaker, we know that immigration is essential in the fight against the labour shortage, and there is a priority process in place for the sought-after categories. We're talking about 260,000 work permits this year compared to 80,000 last year. We will continue to ensure that employers in Canada and in Quebec have access to the workers that they need in order to ensure Canada's economic recovery.
For Nunavut.
I asked this government to meet with the most impacted communities of the Baffinlands Mary River project. The Minister of Environment promised that they would do consultations, but since February, my constituents have been ignored by this government. The Minister of Northern Affairs has less than 70 days before a decision needs to be made on this urgent issue. The most impacted communities cannot be ignored. When will this government finally listen to Indigenous voices before making decisions that impact their lives?
The Honourable Minister for Northern Affairs.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank the member for the very important question. And on May 13th, the Independent Nunavut Impact Review Board submitted their report on the Baffinlands Iron Mine project. We thank them for their important work and thank all Northern and Indigenous partners for their participation in the NERB process. No decision has been made at this time. We will be taking the time to review the report along with federal officials. A decision will be taken following appropriate due diligence and comprehensive analysis, including whether the duty to consult has been met.
Honourable Member for Elmwood Transcona.
Madam Speaker, when the pandemic began and Canadians lost their jobs, then their paychecks, the government said, apply for help, don't wait, apply now. If you apply in good faith, you won't be punished. In fact, they took public servants from other departments and applied them to rolling CERB out the door. Now we've got delays in other departments on immigration, on access to EI. Where are those public servants? The government has asked them to put the squeeze on Canadians for $2,000, $4,000, $10,000 while they're struggling with inflation, while they're struggling with higher interest rates. So why is it that the government doesn't make it a priority to have government workers deliver the services that people need now instead of chasing after Canadians on debt the government said they shouldn't have to pay?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, allow me to take the opportunity to thank our hardworking public servants who have been working overtime and then some over the course of the pandemic to provide the programs like the CERB and others to vulnerable Canadians and to Canadians who needed help in order to make it through to the other side of the pandemic. I understand the concern that the member is raising, and we will certainly work with him in order to ensure that all Canadians are treated fairly and with respect, Madam Speaker. That has always been our goal, and we have always had Canadian backs. We will continue to do so.
The Honourable Member for St. John's East.
Madam Speaker, June 1st marked the beginning of Pride Month across Canada, a time for all Canadians to celebrate the 2S LGBTQ2+ community and recognize their contributions across this country. Can the Minister of Women and Gender Equality and Youth speak to the importance of Pride season and some of the accomplishments of our government for the LGBTQ2 community? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister. The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank the Honourable Member from St. John's East for her question and incredible advocacy. And while always a time for celebration, Pride season is also a moment to reflect on activists. Many of those in my riding of Toronto Centre who risked everything by living their truth. Their sacrifices and advocacy for LGBTQ2 rights as well as protections have led to a safer and more inclusive Canada. This past year, we banned conversion therapy, and this year's budget proposes $100 million to develop and implement the first ever federal LGBTQ action plan. Every one of us plays a part in building an inclusive Canada. Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Madam Speaker, a local senior from Kelowna Lake Country who does not have a computer booked an appointment at the Service Canada Passport Office in Kelowna. He was turned away because he did not bring in forms he was told were available online only, and staff there couldn't print them. Our fabulous constituency team was pleased to serve him and printed off the forms he needed at my office. How could Service Canada offices not have forms or the capability to print off forms at their office? This is a failure of this government. When is the minister going to put the CERB back into Service Canada?
Wow. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam
Speaker, and I'd like to thank the honourable member for her question and her advocacy for constituents. Madam Speaker, as you know, Service Canada has been ramping up service for Canadians across the country in all of its service centres, step by step, day by day. We know that the volumes and that Canadians need the service delivered to them on a day-to-day basis. However, we also know that as we open up, we need to protect the safety of Canadians and ensure that as they come to our passport centres, that they have the documents they need so that we can serve them better. We will continue to work with Canadians to ensure they get the services they deserve. Thank you.
Member for Edmonton Manning.
Madam Speaker, April 2022, Greater Toronto airports hold more than 2,000 planes on the tarmac. April 2019, they only held 8. The reason? Travel restrictions. Travelers suffer through thousands of hours of delays. No thanks to this government's unnecessary travel policies. When will the Liberals allow Canadians to travel freely again?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Or the Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, I want to thank my honourable colleague for his question. As we've committed to Canadians from the beginning of the pandemic, is that everything we do is based on our desire to protect the health and safety of Canadians. And we've been guided by the advice that we receive from our experts. We have been adjusting our travel measures. We've been lifting some of them and we've been adjusting others, and we'll continuously work with our experts. But let me be clear, Madam Speaker, we're doing everything we can to address delays at airports. We're seeing similar delays around the world.
The Honourable Member for North Okanagan, Shuswap.
Madam Speaker, Vivian from Vernon has waited 3 years to attend an Indigenous Sundance ceremony in the U.S. because of COVID mandates. She applied for her passport in early April, sent the application by registered mail, and has a Canada Post signed receipt of delivery. Vivian paid for expedited passport service and has been charged to her credit card. My office made an inquiry, and Service Canada has no record of her application. Why has the minister failed so badly at her job?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Question is advocacy for its constituent on this particular file. Madam Speaker, Canadians are travelling again and we're seeing unprecedented volumes around the country. And yes, there are specific cases that do need attention. I would encourage the member to reach out to my office so that we can find his constituent's file and make sure that she can travel to her appointed time.
The Honourable Member for Peterborough-Kawartha.
We have extreme labour shortages. We have ridiculous delays at the airport, at Service Canada. We have a deep divide in this country that has prevented family and friends from maybe ever speaking again.
Shameful.
And there is one thing that can stop all of this. Drop the mandates and lift the ridiculous travel restrictions. Experts from across every sector agree, except our Prime Minister. He tells us we are still in a pandemic, yet every province in every other country except China and North Korea has lifted these restrictions. So other than wanting extreme control, what is the reason for punishing Canadians and our tourism industry?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for her concern for her constituents and for her question for a consistent advocacy on this. But we have to recognize that in the month of May, Madam Speaker, over 1,700 Canadians died. I'm not trying to scare anybody, but we have to recognize that COVID is not over. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Canadians are still dying from COVID-19. These public health restrictions have helped Canadians stay alive throughout this pandemic, and they will continue to. And I'd hope that the members opposite could have some compassion to the families who are grieving for their dead family members who passed away in May.
L'honorable député de... L'honorable député de Pierre-Boucher, les Patriotes, Verchères.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam Speaker, Quebec has already been robbed of $342 million in the infrastructure agreement and could lose up to $4 billion more. Why? Because Ottawa is unilaterally changing the terms of the agreement signed with Quebec. They're changing the deadline to submit projects from 2025 to March 31st, 2023. What happens if Quebec can't submit in 10 months all the projects it would have had 3 years to prepare? I quote the minister, the funds will be taken back. Why not respect the signed agreement instead of stealing Quebecers' money?
L'honorable ministre.
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, on the contrary, Quebec has not lost a single cent of the money allocated for their transit and infrastructure projects. However, Madam Speaker, the Bloc would have you believe that there are no infrastructure projects that are ready in Quebec or needed. We believe, on the contrary, we want to see infrastructure money roll into the province of Quebec as quickly as possible to ensure that these funds are building the things that Quebecers need, like reliable transit and infrastructure, as quickly as possible. And that's what we're committed to doing as soon as the province provides us with their priority list.
The
minister said the exact opposite. On Monday, in committee, he admitted that he took $342 million from Quebec. He said, we did not transfer any money to Quebec. And what happens to the $4 billion promised to Quebec in March 2023? Again, he said that the money that's not used before March 31st will be taken back. It will not be transferred. The Liberals are violating the agreement. They stole $342 million from Quebec, and they're threatening to steal more. Why aren't they respecting the agreement? What good is signing an agreement with a government like this? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, there has not been any money stolen from the province of Quebec. On the contrary, all of the money that is allocated for Quebec will go to Quebec as soon as those priority projects are identified by the province. Madam Speaker, we want to ensure that all transit and infrastructure projects, all the money allocated are rolled out into the provinces and territories, but we need our counterparts from Quebec to identify those priority projects, and we look forward to rolling out those funds as soon as...
Member for Calgary Centre.
Well, Madam Speaker, G7 nations are calling on OPEC for energy solutions instead of turning to one of its own, Canada. No. Simple question, why?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. The Honourable Minister. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We are working very hard with our European colleagues and with the Americans. I was in Berlin just last week having conversations with them about how Canada can continue to work to support Europe at a time of crisis with respect to energy security, while also ensuring that we are enabling them to continue to work on the important energy transition to reduce carbon emissions in line with what climate science tells us we must.
For Calgary Centre.
I didn't quite follow that, but Madam Speaker, G7 nations stated that the energy security crisis is a grave concern for households around the world. Right. Canada, as a member of the G7, has the world's third largest reserves, yet our allies are not looking to us for energy solutions. Under this government, Canada has lost credibility with our peers. Can the minister tell Canadians how his government has failed to be able to help our allies?
The Honourable Minister.
Speaker, I would simply say my honourable colleague is wrong. I was at the meetings of G7, and Canada participated actively with our colleagues. He conveniently ignores that the communique coming out of the G7 focuses very much on addressing energy security issues within the context of also addressing climate. As he also knows, we have accelerated the production of oil and gas by 300,000 barrels a year, 300,000 barrels a day by the end of the year. To address some of those energy security issues, we are talking with Europe about LNG and hydrogen as a transition to a low carbon future. We certainly are partnering very actively with our European friends.
Honourable Member for Edmonton West.
Madam Speaker, government departments are continuing to violate Treasury Board rules by allowing Liberal insiders and preferred vendors to split contracts in order to avoid a competitive bid process. Order paper question came back shows several hundred examples of this. This was brought up to the previous Treasury Board president, who frankly could care less. Will the new Treasury Board president address this, or will she too turn a Liberal blind eye to this corruption?
Honorable Présidente du Conseil du Trésor.
Madam Speaker, our government is committed to providing high-quality services to Canadians while ensuring the best value for taxpayers, which is why contracts are issued in a fair way in accordance with Treasury Board policies. The procurement of professional services is used to complement the work of Canada's professional public service by meeting unexpected fluctuations in workload and to acquire special expertise, such as in response to the healthcare needs of remote northern communities. We know a strong federal public service is the best way to deliver for Canadians, and we will continue to do so. Madame la Speaker.
Honorable député d'Alfred Pellin.
Madame la Présidente, le maintien...
Madam Speaker, maintaining good jobs in Quebec's regions is a key aspect of solid economic development. The Parliamentary Secretary for the Minister of National Revenue has an update on the new tax centre in Shawinigan and the benefits it'll bring to the region. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague for Alfred Pellin for this question and his hard work. The centre in Shawinigan will create 150 new jobs and ensure stability for those already working in the region. Combined with the agency's pilot program for jobs in Quebec's regions, this is more evidence of our profound commitment towards the success of these important communities. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Essex.
Speaker, Statistics Canada and the 2022 budget show that Canada is lacking almost 1 million workers. As baby boomers retire, the worker deficit will increase to 2 million. Currently, the number of people entering the workforce are not enough to fill this gap. This absence of workers only puts further stress and strain on those who are already working because they lack the support they need. Speaker, how will this government help increase the number of workers entering the workforce and ensure that current workers don't burn out because employers are understaffed?
Good question. Good question.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, we have the lowest unemployment rate in over 50 years, and the member opposite is absolutely right. There is a labor shortage in this country right now, and that is why our government is so focused on ensuring that we welcome new immigrants to this country. I certainly hope that the Conservative Party agrees that immigration is an excellent solution to the labor shortage in this country, Madam Speaker. It is certainly part of our core values to be open and inviting to the world, and I hope that the Conservatives will join us.
Honourable Member for Surrey Moose Mountain.
Madam Speaker, this government's lack of action to address escalating gas prices could now literally be a matter of life and death. One city in my riding has asked the Minister of Finance for a rebate on fuel costs, specifically for ambulances and fire trucks, because they can no longer afford to keep them fueled up. Will this government do the right thing and remove the GST on fuel, thereby delivering much-needed relief to municipalities just trying to fill up the tanks of their emergency service fleets?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, we are well aware that the global increase in energy prices is hitting us all very hard, which is why we have various measures in the budget that are going to ensure that Canadians will see money go directly back into their pockets. It is also why we have an incentive program when it comes to the price on pollution that we implemented, which does ensure that 8 out of 10 Canadians receive more as part of the incentive program, as part of our federal subsidy, than they pay in the price on pollution, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Member for Regina Wascana.
Madam Speaker, Regina City Council has identified the construction of a new aquatic centre as a top priority in its recreational master plan. Fortunately, enough money has already been allocated to the city through the Investing in Canada infrastructure program. Unfortunately, much of that money is going unspent because it is locked into mothballed public transit projects. Madam Speaker, will the government be reasonable and flexible and approve the request to reallocate these funds?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to my honourable colleague for raising this question. As a former city councillor myself, I understand the importance of investing in community infrastructure like recreation, community centres, and we are committed to working with all levels of government, all orders of government, to ensure that the priorities that they set forward, that there are infrastructure dollars there. But Madam Speaker, we must also be clear that the need for clean, reliable, efficient transit across this country is incredibly important. I endeavor to work with that member and his local councillors to determine the best way to move forward on these projects, but we're committed to building.
Member for Cloverdale Langley City.
Madam Speaker, our country's rail transportation system connects communities and keeps our supply chains running. However, accidents still happen and that unfortunately result in injuries and even fatalities. Can the Minister of Transport update the House on what our government is doing to protect Canadians and keep our rail system safe?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, I want to thank my honourable colleague for this timely question and for his advocacy. Our government is working to ensure that Canada's rail transportation system remains one of the safest in the world. This morning, I announced that we are investing $24 million for 147 projects across the country under our Rail Safety Improvement Program. This is in addition to the $107 million we've invested since 2017. I want to assure my honourable colleague and all Canadians that we will keep taking action to keep our rail system safe.
The Honourable Member for South Okanagan, West Kootenay.
Madam Speaker, last month, hurricane-force winds destroyed large sections of the power grids in Ontario and Quebec. Floods inundated the West Point First Nation in Northwest Territories and the Peguis First Nation in Manitoba. And a report from the Globe and Mail showed that even more Canadian communities are at serious risk of flooding. Extreme weather is costing Canada more than $5 billion every year, and that will only increase. When will Ottawa fund significant proactive measures to protect our communities instead of just helping them clean up?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker.
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Speaker, and I want to thank the member opposite for this important question. I can tell you the storm impacted my community right here in Ottawa.
Can I talk to you about this one, please?
I'm sorry. There's an honourable member who has a microphone unmuted. I would ask them to mute their microphones, except for the Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Speaker. I want to thank the member for this. As well, we have to invest in building resiliency in our infrastructure, and that's why there is a over $3 billion mitigation and adaptation fund available. We will continue to work with our respective local communities so that planning could take place and we could invest in building more resilient infrastructure to deal with the drastic impacts of climate change. Thank you.
Is all the time for oral questions. My God. Affaires courantes. Tabling of documents. Introduction of government bills. Tabling of documents. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you. Madam Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 36-8A, I have the honour to table in both official languages the government's response to one petition. This return will be tabled in an electronic format.
Introduction of government bills. Statements by ministers. Reports from interparliamentary delegations.